I'll call the meeting to order.
The meeting has been posted according to open meeting laws.
Roll call.
President Seeger.
Here.
Trustee Alexander.
Here.
Trustee Nugent. Here. Trustee Johnson. Trustee Renucci.
Here.
Trustee Smalley. Trustee Wisniewski.
Here.
Thank you.
Just get another reminder, anytime that anybody is going to be speaking, whether it's board members or participation from the audience, we do need to use the microphones because we are trying to televise this meeting. And with that being said, citizen participation per Village Resolution 2017-01. Anyone wishing to address the village board during citizen participation will be allowed 5 minutes. Your subject can be anything, whether on the agenda or not. The village board should not engage in a discussion regarding comments because it was not part of a publicly noticed agenda. Upon conclusion of the citizen participation segment, members of the audience are not allowed further comment unless they are participating in a public hearing and if specifically allowed by a majority vote of the village board due to involvement in an agenda item. With that being said, would anybody like to speak during citizen participation? Anybody like to speak during citizen participation? If no, then I'll close citizen participation and move on to consent agenda. One motion and a second will approve all the following items. Any item may be pulled from the list and voted on separately.
I'll move to. Can we pull out 15, please?
We need to pull it out, or do we just
pull it out
discuss it?
Separate, vote on it separately?
Okay. In that case, I'll move to approve the remains of the consent agenda.
Second. I have a question on number 8.
Jason?
I just want to abstain from 15.
40?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Okay, I guess I was reading the notice that Jason gave us, and there's just certain AC units, right, Jason?
This is for one AC unit.
Okay. Are the lines buried then from where, is it placed outside and they're buried up into the building?
Correct. They're in a conduit that runs into the building.
Okay, and then the lines are going to be tested, pressure tested and all that?
And flushed, correct, because they have to change the refrigerant.
Right, the old-fashioned R7 is no longer, okay, got it. All right, that was what, just make sure they test. Thank you.
All right, there's a motion and a second on the floor. All those in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Yeah, I want to make a motion for 15.
I'll move to approve item 15 of the consent agenda.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carries. Miscellaneous business. Presentation of 2021 audit report from Johnson Block.
Good evening. My name is Kevin Krasinski, audit partner from Johnson Block. What I intend to do is just give a very brief 5 to 10 minute overview on the financials, the audit. What we have right now is in draft form. We intend to finalize it before the end of the month. The audit report itself, or the financial statements themselves, are about 75 pages. What I want to do is just give a little bit of an outline in terms of what's included within there. And the first couple pages in there is the independent auditor's report, which is what we're engaged to do, is to get an opinion to determine whether or not the financial statements are presented in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. It's an unmodified opinion, which indicates that it is. There's a section entitled Management Discussion and Analysis that follows that, which is consolidated information. But when you get into the meat of the financial statements, there's fund financial statements, which contains, the city's trial balance that's sent over, and, the budget that you adopt is got multiple funds, and that's what we're auditing, and we're presenting that in the format required by generally accepted accounting principles. The larger section of the the audited financial statements is the footnotes to the financial statements, and outside of a summary of accounting policies, all the major transaction areas, cash, receivables, debt, TIF districts, you've got pension plans, that information is presented in there also. And then somewhat towards the beginning, there's a section called government-wide statements that are similar to like a consolidation. They wrap all of the financial statements together. So that in and of itself is what the content of the financial statements are. Once the audit is finalized, that is used oftentimes for your bonding companies. When you go out for external bonding, they will use the audited financial statements in their bond documents. And, you know, when you get rated by Moody's or some other rating agencies, they look at that information also. There's also a section that we've got called required audit communication to the village board. And, there is some boilerplate communications that we have there. There's nothing really out of the ordinary that we have included in there. There's a couple of management recommendations. We've got what's called material audit adjustments that we indicate as a material weakness. To be honest with you, that comment is in the majority, an awful lot of our clients, and it's basically what that comment indicates is that when we were doing the audited for the village, there was a couple areas, mainly capital-related items in which we needed to, there was construction projects that were needed to be reclassified for and capitalized. Those were the main areas that, along with some adjusting entries related to some of the pension. The WRS has a rather technical standard regarding recording their pension asset and liability, and we assisted the village in doing that. It's pretty normal for a village your size. Some of the other comments that we have, again, given the size, you've got pretty good internal controls, but you're not going to get total segregation of duties that was associated with that. And I guess finally, we just indicated that next year there's a pretty comprehensive new accounting standard regarding leases that it sounds like you have a few leases that will probably be applied, and it will make your 75-page audit maybe closer to 80 pages. But it's going to get a little bit more technical, but that is a new standard that's not just new to the village, but for-profit industries are having to record and account for that also. Some of the key financial results, the general fund, from a standpoint, it was basically break even. It had an increase in fund balance of a little over $900, but there was a transfer of $200,000 that went from the general fund to the capital projects fund that was included within there, and that was from excess surplus funds. So for the most part, you had a positive increase in the fund balance there. Your unassigned fund balance, which is the remaining fund balance exclusive of any money that's earmarked for specific purposes or restricted for specific purposes, was about 45% of your operating expenses, which is a healthy amount to have. A lot of financial activity related into TIF 4 had a little over $2.4 million in capital expenditures, and I think you still have some projects continuing associated with that. Your TIF 3 will be terminating soon, and I had some brief highlights relating to the water and sewer utility, Both of those had, increases in, operating income and cash flow. So they operated in positive on there. Your general obligation debt limit, which is you're legally restricted to the amount of general obligation taxing authority debt that you can borrow. Your limit is about $21.4 million, and the GO debt that counts towards that is a little bit over $10 million. So you're at about 50% of the capacity. So that increase from last year, and I think most of that was related to your TIF borrowings. So that's the quick 5 to 10 minute summary overview. So comments, questions?
I got one. You just mentioned that we have $10 million in out of the $21.4 million debt limit, but how much of that is going to be reduced after this TIF closes?
I don't know if you know.
That final payment was just made, and the final payment was about $700,000. Under 700. It was probably 600 and some.
So then the closing is reflected in the balance of what we have out for
No,
finance?
because at year-end, that was the balance, and then, but only 600 and some thousand of that balance was related to that final TID payment.
My questions are more forward-looking. Is there anything that you're seeing around ARPA, or we're talking later about infrastructure funding, that we should be aware of in terms of next year's audit? Obviously, we got to worry about the GASB change on lease accounting, but
you know, the ARPA money, most of the communities that we've had, they did not specifically identify them for the purposes of the 21 audit, and they're in the process of doing that. It's been a little bit challenging from the standpoint is like every couple months there's updates to what, you know, the ARPA requirements are in terms of, you know, there's the general, there's a revenue limit exemption that was just approved at the beginning of the year, that there's like a $10 million exemption for revenue loss. We were going to be sending out a mass email to clients. We started today. I was going to get to yours tomorrow and regarding some of the reporting requirements. So look for that. Because there's some April 30th deadlines if you want to make this $10 million revenue loss exemption. So at the beginning of this, clients were trying to looking at spreadsheets to determine whether or not they qualified for revenue loss. They simplified the process and said, you know, if it's, you know, you've obviously got less than $10 million in ARPA money, you can just take the exemption. Some of the things that I'm seeing, you know, with a lot of the stimulus money going into the communities is construction costs are high. I mean, if you're looking at forward thinking things, because I went to a couple board meetings this year where, you know, some of them were using some of the ARPA money for utility projects, and some of the bids were coming in 20-30% higher than what they were originally planning. So that's a challenge to navigate. So
Other questions for Kevin? Very much.
thank you. Appreciate it.
All right, moving on to consideration of Walworth County radio system project and potential location of antenna and equipment on village property.
Good evening. My name is Dave Gerber. I'm the undersheriff at the Sheriff's Office, and this is Captain Todd Newman. He's in charge of our Communications Division. I'm here to talk to you this evening about a radio upgrade project that we've been working on for about 5 or 6 years now. We've had 2 consulting firms that have involved in the process, as well as, selected a vendor at this point, radio project, throughout the entire county. So it's all fire, all police, all EMS for the entire county. It includes mobile radios to squad radios to center, the towers and all the infrastructure that supports. So, worked here in the village for, there are places in the village, and the chief made a test to it, that there's poor communication coverage for both the fire and the police department, as well as all the police and fire in the county. Let Captain Newman here talk a little bit more, get in the weeds a little bit about the project, where we're at, and
Right. I'm a geek when it comes to this stuff, and I'm very passionate about this project. So, with that being said, please ask lots of questions. I love to talk about it. But what you see up on the screen in front of you is a summary of our current radio system, where we're at now. And right now we're dealing with a system that dates from the 1980s. It's been updated over the years to the best that the technology had to offer at the time, but it's time to replace it because we have very limited coverage. And as you look at the map on the screen on the left-hand side of the diagram, we only have one transmitter site in the center of the county in Elkhorn. And as a result of that, we have a very fragmented system of local channels that's just not very efficient anymore, and we have no interoperability between police, fire, and even the Department of Public Works except at a local level. So when we have large-scale incidents, it makes it very, very hard for agencies to talk to each other. And we're still a small enough county that the sheriff's department comes in and helps the village a lot. We call the village out to help the sheriff's office. We're in the township. We need to be able to talk to each other. We also have very limited redundancy. Right now, if I lose that tower in Elkhorn, my system falls apart. If you look on the right-hand side, we solved some of this problem by installing remote receiver sites over the years, and they microwave that signal back to the city of Elkhorn. But as you look back at the left side, you see a lot of red and gray on the periphery of that diagram. Those are spots where we either have very poor coverage or we have no coverage at all. And the village itself happens to be in one of the grayed areas where we have no coverage. So the goal of the system, if you move on to the next slide, number one, provide us with a system that provides reliable radio coverage for every agency in this county. And that would include your village police department, the fire department, and even the public works department if they chose to come on board the system. To do that, we're going to put up a series of 10 towers. And those tower sites, the proposed tower sites, are the little blue wheels that you see on the screen. And you can see from the diagram that that coverage depiction depicts good, solid coverage throughout the entire county. So we're also going to have redundancy. So if the main system fails, I will have a redundant system controller in another location that's going to allow the system to continue as if nothing happened until we can make repairs to the main part of the system. We're going to have interoperability. The police department, the fire department, the sheriff's office will all be on the same system along with Public Works and able to talk to each other. And then we're going to update mobile and portable radio equipment that's going to be compatible with our system and other modern systems out there. So part of the reason I'm here tonight is one of the identified tower locations that we'd like to use is we'd like to ask you for your agreement to use your village water tower. That's not only going to benefit the village in that we're going to have reliable coverage in the center of the village, but it's going to be interconnected with a series of 10 towers throughout the county that are going to talk to each other and be redundant with each other. So with your water tower, we're going to take and we're going to put antennas and microwave dishes on the top so that they talk to each other, and we're going to put a generator at the base of the tower for redundancy for any power loss. I know one of the questions that your Public Works Director had was if we would be willing to possibly allow the village to use part of the generator in the event that we had a power failure, and we are certainly open to that after our engineer takes a look at things and we know what we're dealing with. If we move on to the next slide, there's some other features of the system that we're also going to have available. One of them is the efficiency here of a fire paging system. And if I could get you to play the video, this is going to depict a system called U.S. Digital Designs.
I don't think I can play the video.
All right. Well, if I was able to play the video, If I was able to play the video, it would show you a system that's connected to our computer-aided dispatch system. So when the ambulance is needed here in the village, the computers connect to each other, and as the dispatcher's taking the information, it's automatically paging out the fire department for the ambulance or for the structure fire, getting those resources going that much faster and using my people in the comm center to much greater efficiency. As opposed to the timeline, we're just starting to look at the tower locations now. So as of tomorrow, I'm going to be going around with an engineer, and we're going to start to figure out what we need for the tower. Like the undersheriff said, this has been an ongoing project with us since 2016. We went through 2 separate radio studies that confirmed that it was time to replace our aging system. And then I've spent the better part of the last year and a half getting the RFP, the request for proposal, out to the street, making sure that I chose the system that was going to be the best for everybody concerned. And now we've got a contract with that vendor, and we are beginning the initial phases of the final system design to be. That will continue through this year. Hopefully by early next year, we're actually putting up tower sites and modifying or installing a tower equipment on the sites that are already in existence. And by mid to late 2024, we're starting to look at going live. So this will be a multi-year project, but it's one of the most important projects that I've done in the course of my career anyway. Do you have any questions for me?
I just have a question on the water tower. So are there any other options besides the water tower, and why did we choose the water tower?
The water tower was chosen, the company that we chose to work with is a company called Raycom out of Marshalltown, Iowa. And they went through about 600 different designs to get what they consider the optimum coverage, and they've identified that structure as a structure they'd like to use. The other option that I talked to Mr. Eckwitz and Ms. Soom about was using a plot of land at your other tank location at 120 and I-43 and allowing us to put up a tower at that location should the water tower not be a viable option.
So with the timeline, don't we have some of the radio towers up there already?
Not on the water tower itself, so at each storage tank, there's a separate tower for, AT&T or not AT&T, but other cell providers.
Okay.
But there's nothing, the only antennas on our water tower are the water meter reading antenna and the SCADA antenna.
Okay.
And a PD antenna.
So as you're rolling these out and you're putting the new antennas up, how do you handle the handoff? Is it like big bang, go live, everybody across, we turn off our old system and we're now on the new system? Is it a gradual? How does that work?
It'll be a gradual because we'll have to put all the components in place, and then we'll have to do the Verizon style "can you hear me now" testing. And we won't go live or flip the switch or turn off the old system until we're confident that the new system is tested and ready to operate.
What's the frequency or band that you're operating on?
It'll be 700, 800 megahertz, which is pretty much the gold standard for modern public safety systems throughout the country.
And then on the computer-aided dispatch, are we on ProPhoenix?
Yes, everyone in the county is using ProPhoenix. So we hold the master server system for that system, and we control the CAD, and the village is your own separate slice of the pie, so to speak, but it's all part of the central server system.
We have integrations with, I'm just thinking with us being so close to Mukwonago and the township, do we have integrations with Waukesha County or anything like that on there?
As part of the system, yeah, we will have interoperability with Waukesha County, Mukwonago, and the surrounding areas.
And I'm sorry, I can geek out on it too, because I work for Milwaukee County and we were trying to do CAD to CAD for a long time with ProPhoenix, so I know the challenges that you...
Actually, we're working on a CAD to CAD interface between ourselves and Lake Geneva, and you could potentially include some other communities in that. That's a new product that Phoenix is offering, and we're just about to put it on our test server to give it a try.
Captain, from a radio system standpoint, what point, if this is going to be going countywide for police and fire and potentially DPW, at what point is there a concern over saturation? You know, only so many people can talk at once, that sort of thing? How does the system handle that?
The nice thing is that this is gonna be a trunking system, and what a trunking system does, if you picture, best way I can describe it is to picture an orchestra, and the controller for the trunking system is kinda like the conductor of the orchestra. If you pick up your radio on one end, and you're calling me on the other end, the conductor of the orchestra gets a little data burst from your radio, and it says, oh, you wanna make a transmission. So it assigns you the flute section to make that transmission. You call me, I call you back, and by that time, the flute section is engaged in a different transmission, so it assigns me the cellos to call you back. On your radio and my radio, it looks like we're on the same channel, and we've never left the same channel. But what a trunking system does is it allows a great deal of users to share a limited amount of frequencies very efficiently. So you have, and you also hierarchy the frequencies, or the users, meaning that the police department and the fire department would get the highest priority. And if the system got really busy, DPW may have to wait a minute. But generally, they don't have the same emergencies that police and fire are dealing with. Plus, we've engineered the system to account for a certain number of calls per hour and the capacity to handle that.
So in a way, it's like voice over IP with quality of service?
Yes, very much. And it's secure because the police department can't just go buy a new radio. They're going to buy a new radio, and we have to give them permission to put it on the system, which we will, but it takes away the hackers, if you will, from hacking into the system.
I guess to that comment, is it encrypted?
We will have encryption capability, yes. I don't know that we'll run encrypted all the time, but we'll have the capability to be encrypted, yes.
I have a question for Jason really quick, though. Jason, on our tower, did you foresee any other problems with putting the antennas up on top?
So at our meeting a couple weeks ago, we discussed a couple of these things, and I don't know if you guys remember, a couple of years ago, AT&T came to us and wanted to put some antennas on the water tower, and there was some thought at the time that there potentially is a structural concern with the water tower. That apparently when it was assembled, maybe some sections were put together in the wrong order. So obviously that question needs to be answered before we can do anything. But my only other concern really is just that we don't have any interference with our SCADA antenna or our water meter reading system.
To answer that question too, we're going to have an engineer very carefully evaluate your tower before we would put anything up on it. We want to make sure that we're spending the money responsibly and in the right fashion, and we obviously want to make sure that we take care of the village as well.
I appreciate that. I guess the whole point I wanted to make, though, is that, and it actually, Jason, it was even more than a few years ago when they first discovered that problem with the construction of the tower. But it's withstood a lot of windstorms and a lot of rain, a lot of everything else. And my opinion is I don't think it's going anywhere.
And one of the things that we've talked about, their engineer had mentioned, was an ultrasonic scan of the tank to essentially check the thickness of each section of steel to see where it's at. Because, again, we're kind of going by hearsay on that potentially this thing was put together wrong. I don't know if that's the case or not, but obviously it's something we need to investigate.
So I guess my last question is a timeline for budgeting for our purchase of new radios for our fire and EMS, and then for police. When is that we should be looking at buying those in 2023, 2024?
I can answer that. I've been putting money away in that capital budget line item for, I think this was the second year. Got 2 more years that I'm going to be putting money away, so we should be okay, hopefully come end of 2024.
as part of our contract to, the village and the police department, the fire department, public works, we locked in pricing. So the village will receive the same discounted pricing on your portable and mobile radios that we will, as provided you purchase them through our vendor and you purchase them within the timeline of the radio system.
Sounds like we've been backing it up financially. We figured that out ahead of time already. And you're gonna do your due diligence, with an engineer to identify that that tower is going to support that tower that's needed. So. Jason?
Yeah, my suggestion would be that we do let our engineer, and this point it would be Strand for this project, take a look at it as well. Take a look, you know, they could come back to us with what their report is, and then I would want them to just take a look at that as well.
Well, thank you very much. Appreciate that presentation. I'm glad that you guys all got to geek out for a little bit. All right. All right, dam project update. Tim?
Well, you may have noticed some snow outside today, and the weather has not exactly been kind to this project, to say the least. I guess we're back here about a month ago talking about the alignment and what we're going to go as far as project-wise. They have carried on through some tougher conditions with equipment sinking and working through some of that. So 2 runs of storm sewer have been installed. Challenge we have right now today is the cover material for the on top of the storm sewers. The site overall does approximately balance. Challenge being is the excess soil is on the south side of the creek, whereas we need the soil for the storm sewers covered on the north side. So we asked for some options from the contractor. Hey, what are some options to make this work on a cost-effective manner? They gave us a couple. Actually, a third one we're not bringing to the board, which is hauling it around on our roads, just because it doesn't make sense economically, and then trashing our roads. So the 2 options we have to present are essentially building an existing pond, or not building, creating a new pond, as shown on option 1, an offline pond. It would be fed with some of the water from the stream. Question is really, what is that? Becomes a maintenance question, and how does that look overall over time? Concern being a lot of cattails in that area potentially. Now we could dig it deeper, but it's not going to get the water flow that you would in option 2. Option 2, if you want a page down there, is similar but in a sense we're going to be creating an island, and on the east side of that we have a riffle there to essentially keep the water higher, to allow water to the pond to stay full, and then trickles over the riffle at the end back into the stream. Final configuration really is something we'd work on in the field as far as how much really material do we need to get the cover that we're looking for. But our recommendation is just from a maintenance standpoint, because that really becomes the stream at that point. Our recommendation is the alternate 2. It's a more expensive option, however, I think in the end it's going to be a better product. The other thing we're able to do with that is you can look at the storm sewer outlets, and we would essentially create this pond all the way to where those ponds outlet, to then trap that water before, and essentially clean the water before then it discharges into the stream. So get some added environmental benefits that way as well.
Hey, Tim, thank you. You know, if we're looking at option 2 and we create an island, how is that island going to be maintained? I'm looking at you too, Jason. How are you going to deal with that?
Obviously, we won't have access to be able to get to it to address anything. I mean, without a bridge, obviously, and we don't have a bridge, and a bridge will be very costly.
What would we look at from a standpoint of plantings there?
We'd still look at some native plantings, there would be my thought. Some native grasses,
Okay.
maintenance, yes, getting across and doing burns from time to time would be the way to do it.
My question was that if you do the pond with the riffle in option 2, would that give you an extra amount of soil then to be able to cover some of the concrete storm sewer lines that are coming off of?
Both options have enough material to do that. The reason that option 2 is more expensive truly is because of the riffle itself, which is bringing in a lot of rock to do that. But also the construction is just a little bit more difficult to construct. It's more channel to construct than just a simple pond. Not a simple pond, but than just a pond would be.
I think either option 1 or 2 are going to present some maintenance concerns, right? So option 2, I think, is less of a concern only because it's got an inlet and an outlet. So I think that helps to turn the water over in the pond. I'm still thinking that potentially a pond like this could need aeration, because obviously we don't want to create a pond and, have green water. So we'll want to, whatever we do, we'll want it to be a decent water feature, but it's going to require some maintenance to get there.
Both options would be created with depth, and we try to get some relatively steep banks to avoid the cattail, to minimize cattails on the edges as best we can. Depth, probably about 6 feet. We want to definitely be over 4, and we're going to need that much material just to get the cover anyways. So, if we got 6 feet, it allows some type of storage. Once you get into 2 or 3 feet, then we're going to have more cattail issues.
And the riffle as well in option 2 is kind of the key to backing that water up and really holding, keeping water in the pond even in August when the water levels are low. Right this time of the year wouldn't be a problem. What concerns me is when August comes around and things are dry, that we're able to maintain water in that pond.
So I guess one of the concerns I think I sent you that I heard was the volume of water coming out of those storm sewer outlets.
Yeah.
How would that impact, like this is coming right into that riffle and right into that channel? Is there potential?
Yeah, I mean, part of the nice thing about that riffle being there is it's going to discharge in there, and it'll allow some of the energy to dissipate. It'll also allow some cleaning as we got some of that backed up to stay in the pond. On the west side, even more so because the water's going to discharge in there and then flow into the pond where it gives it some settling time.
And then let's say we get a really heavy rainfall, just setting aside the storm sewer aspect, just overall, is there a concern with that island or any of this? I mean, obviously, you get a flood.
You could add some channeling. Yeah, I mean, we would looking at it, we would make that deep enough to minimize that. Also, you've got to realize that we're not changing the main channel itself. We're not minimizing that main channel. So that itself is going to be large enough to convey the real storms. Floods are different, but.
Question is the piles that we have on the south side of that creek, where was that product from? Was that from the dredging? Was that from the cattail areas?
That was from the east side. So where the dam is, dam going out probably 500 feet to the west, because it was flat and then dropped off, and we needed to take that elevation and spread it out over the project and not just have it drop off because that's what we're eliminating is the dam. That's where that dredge material came from, is that elevation change in the stream from basically the dam to about 500 feet or so to the west.
There wasn't any of the castings, like from dredging that area, it could have been swung to the opposite side, to the north end of that stream?
In theory, it could have been. At the time, we weren't working on the north side, though.
So the one thing that I am concerned about, and I understand that we have a dollar amount in front of us and money we have to pay for, but it almost sounds like poor planning on RLP's project, and we're going to help them out with a mistake that may have been made or a lack of pre-planning on where that material should have ultimately been.
Yes and no. To the extent that, yes, it would have been nice to be able to put that on the north At the time when they were digging this area, though, they were directed to keep everything on the south side for other reasons.
And I think there could be another option on the table, and that's wait for next winter. That would just address the issue that you just brought up. If the ground was froze, then they could traverse it again.
Don't our permits expire, though?
We would probably have to get an extension, but I would think that that would easily be, you know, I mean, obviously, we have some erosion concerns prior to that that would have to be addressed.
And they've got temp seeding, and the temp seeding has started. But, yes.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, what's it gonna cost if we wait till next winter, bring all this equipment back in again, you know? I mean,
And we've been waiting for so many years, let's just get this thing done.
One other thing I wanted to talk about too, just really quick, is the cattails. Everybody continues to talk about cattails, and cattails are a natural thing that happens around a body of water.
Yep.
All around that area, if you look in the tree areas of that Mill Pond area, there are cattails. If you look across the street, across GR 120, whatever you want to call it, there are cattails in that area. The one thing that we've been trying to do is get rid of the invasive cattails. So just because cattails grow, I don't think is necessarily a concern. It's the invasive cattails that are causing the problems that we want to make sure those don't come back. And then the idea that we're actually creating an area that's walkable, something that we can come in there and maintain that. You can go in there on some kind of machine to, if you have to, selectively spray it out if you need to, if you find those invasives again. But this continued talk about cattails, I don't care what you do. It's a body of water, it's going to create cattails.
Sure.
The invasives that we're worried about, and that's it.
Yeah, and from that standpoint, I guess what I'm trying to make sure we design into it is if we put enough water depth in there, that becomes less of a problem, or it becomes less of a long-term maintenance trying to deal with invasives. Whereas if we would just come and skim off a foot below and say that's enough material, that's going to fill in, not be walkable, and all those other problems. So as part of getting depth in that area, it allows us to raise the other areas up and allows us to have better drainage and better landscaping and whatnot.
And so, Tim, option 2, proposed pond, that will provide us the spoil we need to cover the 2 remaining storm sewer outfall pipes, right?
Correct.
The concrete pipe all the way, and then yet provide soils for the former shoreline to grade that consistently?
Yes. Yeah, there's enough material there. If you kind of look at it, you kind of can visualize it. If you look each side of that pond or riffle feature, water feature, you can see the storm sewers, and you can see the material that was planned to go on top of that. So you can look at just the general area, knowing that we've got to get probably about 3 to 4 feet of material on top of those storm sewers. And if we go down about 6 feet, you can just kind of see that, yeah, that should be good for that area. And plus, we've got some addressing of the shoreline areas to do as well.
We had some concerns earlier. If there's a heavy rainstorm in the village, there's an awful lot of water that comes into that lake, the pond, whatever it was, from those storm sewer outlets.
Yep.
And I just want to make sure that we're not just kind of brushing over that we actually understand about the tremendous influx of water that could come in a short period of time, and that's going to be dealt with properly so we don't have any washouts.
Yeah, correct. There's going to be some riprap and some other reinforcing of the banks at those locations. Those are some big pipes that discharge, and yes, we know they have a tremendous amount of volume.
So, Tim, did you say that the stormwater outlets would empty into this feature at the beginning and at the end, or because I'm looking at the drawing and it shows it going right into the stream, like almost under it, but maybe that's from the original drawing, I don't know.
Well, if you look up
if
here.
If you zoom in on it, it's,
Yeah, if you look up here, we're at the discharge location of the pipe itself.
yeah.
Underneath there we just basically drew on top of an existing drawing. Underneath there was the channel that went out to the stream.
Okay, all right, good, thanks.
That's where it daylighted because we ran out of elevation.
But there's no rock channeling now. With option two, I guess option one and option two, there's no rock channeling, is there?
Option 2, that's correct. Option 1, there's still not a rock channel, but there'd be some type of channel.
And depending upon what we approve tonight, can we get, and again, I know due to weather, but can we get a rough timeline of what we think things are gonna happen with ROP?
Yeah, and we put that in here. I mean, they're talking about finishing the storm sewer in May, and then doing grading in May and June with seeding to follow. So that's their kind of, their rough timeline on it.
That is the rough timeline at this point.
They have started the seeding, which is good news, the temporary seeding, I should say. So, which will help, as the, we've talked about with RLP, which will help to dry up some of the spoils.
And if we get an arc building rainstorm, then we're gonna kind of set things back a little bit, right?
Yes.
And like Tim mentioned, it hasn't been a good spring for this.
I'll make a motion to proceed with the option 2, pond with diversion and riffle.
I'll second that.
Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thanks, Tim. Direction to staff for 2023 to 2026 BIL funding. Oh, sorry, Tim.
Sorry, it's me again. I did just hand out a day of memo, kind of a background on this. We are still, just to give you a quick update, we are proceeding with design on the 2022 fiscal year, federal fiscal year project. That grant application was submitted and should find out here probably within the next 4 to 6 weeks on what happens on that. That said, we have to looking ahead at the 23 through 26 grant applications. Those applications are due June 3rd, which is coming up. As part of that process, the design becomes eligible, and the grant application itself, well, that's separate, but design becomes eligible for federal funding. As part of that process, in order to capture that funding, you have to go through an RFP process for selection of a consulting firm to do that work. We're recommending that you put out a RFP for both the grant application as well as the design of those projects. Now, we've talked to DOT. We believe you can just go out for one RFP for whatever projects you're going to put grant applications in for, and then contractually go through that process after those have been awarded. So what we're recommending is going out and with about a 1-week turnaround, going out to 3 different firms. We would hope we would be considered for one of those firms, but we do have to send it out to other firms as well. I did include a draft RFP that would have to get sent out. So just kind of give you an update on that. And then there will have to be a selection committee, because these are federal funds and they like committees and processes. So, that.
Tim, clarification. Be eligible for the project to be 80-20, 20% village funds. We've got to go through the RFP process, not only for design, but for the entire project to be eligible, correct?
Correct. Yeah, and you're going to want to go either way, but you're going to want to get that 80-20 on the design because you're eligible for it and it would make sense. So you have to go through that process, and you have to document when it's sent out and keep good notes on that, and then you have to have a selection committee. We've recommended some criteria for selection as part of that RFP that we've drafted. There's a list of firms we can put together of people to go out to, but it has to go out to a minimum of 3 firms for the size projects that you guys are looking for.
So now basically I think you have to look away from Tim, and we have to have a conversation about whether or not we want to send this out for an RFP. Obviously, I feel we would select Lynch as one of those 3 firms to send this to, but I guess I'd like the board's thoughts on this. I mean, you know, putting an RFP together, obviously we can do that. This is an extremely tight timeline. I'm sure you guys realize that. But is this something you want to pursue? Do we want to pursue those 80-20 splits? I don't know why we wouldn't.
I would say yes. I would make sure that, appreciate Lynch's input, make sure that we agree with the scoring, and I would just send it to some firms, some other firms that maybe aren't on their list as well, just for independence, and go forward with that.
I can't imagine not going for the 80% funding.
All right, I'll put together an RFP.
Do we need to have on another agenda who's going to be on this committee?
Yeah, because I'll also need to have you take a look at what we've selected for projects.
Let's do April 29th.
So, well, it's two things. One, on the draft RFP that we put in, I put it being due next Friday, thinking it'd go out this week. Most communities are just giving a week to get this done because the applications themselves have to be done by June 3rd. So it's a very quick turnaround. Election committee, I would think maybe you could just pull that together and it almost at this meeting just say, here's who we would like to have. It's just some formal document that has to be done for DOT so that when they ask for documentation, you have something.
Do you need, before this RFP goes out, ideas on to revalidate that list of projects, or can that come before June 3rd, like between the end of April and June 3rd?
I guess I probably won't need a list of projects for the RFP. We'll just need that as part of the application process.
Correct, yeah, and we left it, the draft here is generic in that way, that's saying that, hey, we're gonna go after some projects. We'd like a consultant to prepare the applications and then, negotiate design after they're selected. But we left it very generic for that reason that, hey, there's timing issues.
This is a pretty aggressively sought after funding, and we're almost guaranteed on this. I mean, where are we at with this?
So two things. One, most communities in southeast Wisconsin are going after this. Two, the comments we're hearing from the state is, at least in the 2022, is there's more money than projects. We'll see. The other comment I've heard is we're not looking at any bridges, but there's going to be more bridges looking for construction than the state has cranes in it. It's a lot of money.
Can I ask a really dumb question here? And I'm pretty sure it's going to be no, but it's worth asking. I'm noted for the dumb questions. Is there any reason? Please be honest, of course. We just have money that's going to be expended for a new radio system. Can that be done with this?
I don't know. I mean, this is road funding.
Yeah.
That said, there are other programs out that are coming out now as part of this, such as LED lighting and other stuff. I mean, there's new funding mechanisms that are coming out on about a 3 to 4 week basis, where there's CMAQ, which is coming out too, which is for trails. I mean, there's a lot of different funding. Radios.
We've just had a nice presentation here about the county-wide system and the village's part in that. And I thought maybe it'd be nice if we could kind of work something out and take the burden off the taxpayer then.
I mean, where you were going for it is kind of where I was thinking. At some point in the next month or so, I think we ought to have a discussion of what are all of the things that should just be on a list, and then as these things get clarified more about whether you can or can't apply for them, we just run through that list. And so if it's lighting, if it's trails, it's, that way we don't have to, we're not in a big rush. We've already put some thought into and have 4 or 5 things that you can prioritize.
this is all a reimbursement, correct? In other words, we have to pay for any of the 5-year projects. We have to pay for them in full, and then we are reimbursed, correct?
That's actually not correct. That's what was my initial understanding. That's not correct. It's actually the other way around, where DOT is the bank, and then you pay them at the end.
Oh, okay. Do we have to design 4 shovel-ready projects?
No, what's nice about the 23 through 26 fiscal year projects is they're not as aggressively scheduled as the 2022 was, such that there's more flexibility on when the spend happens as far as design and construction.
Then I guess the only real other question for the board at this point is what that committee looks like. Sounds like we want to move forward with an RFP. I don't know if the board has thoughts on a committee.
How many people?
Oh, 3.
3.
Does it matter who it is? Does it have to be elected officials, or can it be anybody from the village?
I don't think it's more vague. I mean, I would expect Jason to sit on that committee from a public works standpoint, and 2 other people.
I think the language you have on the agenda is broad. To the extent you guys wanted to appoint somebody tonight, I think you could do it. It's direction to staff. Well, I think it's broad enough.
As exciting as I like the idea you brought up, that it doesn't necessarily have to be an elected official, trying to get anybody to volunteer for something is like pulling teeth. So it's going to be
I will
elected
volunteer, even though I am an elected official, I will volunteer.
Here are any other volunteers as elected officials to be on this committee? Joe Wisniewski, Matt Johnson, need one more. Joe Wisniewski is on. And John Alexander. There's your committee.
Does that mean, though, that you have to post public meeting notice because there's 3 of us sitting together?
All right, do you need anything else from us at this point, Tim?
Out of that one.
Okay. All right, update on status of infrastructure and costs for TID number 4.
Thank you.
I see a pivot table, Tim.
I know. I thought you'd appreciate that. So, going through an update just kind of on the business park where we are dollars and cents wise. We did just do an interim payment to Meisey Construction, and there are a couple items that we're still working through with them as far as costs go. A couple items in general, or more specifically of not disagreement, but just working through and need quantities to true up related to the grading. Pretty common on large projects, large grading projects like this, that contractors and engineers don't necessarily agree. We're still at that point where we're still trying to work through that. This project update has showing about 325,000 cubic yards of dirt at $2.30 per cubic yard. Our actual quantity that we calced was at 306. The contractor calced at 353, and we're doing some, we're going back and forth on that, waiting for some additional information that they just were working on. They've told me that they know that their 353 is not correct from the standpoint of when MP Systems was going in, MP had some additional dirt they had to move. So instead of taking dirt, moving it, where then we were going to move it out anyways, we're able to work together and eliminated some of that work. So we know that quantity is, we're still working through that quantity. The other is on the landscape and restoration. There's some issues with the quantities that they submitted, so we're still working through on that as well. That said, we are higher than our estimate. You know, we added that southern portion of the business park where we went to the full build-out instead of stopping short. In our estimation, I think that ended up being a pretty good decision from the standpoint of That's where MP Systems is being constructed as we speak.
Did you stretch out to that cul-de-sac? Was that pushed back farther?
Yes. No, that was the same. It was just the grading that extended beyond that. So our estimate was it was going to cost about $155,000 to do that. We have exceeded, when looking at that standpoint, we are about 8.5% over budget from a grand total budget standpoint of where the contract was to where the actual spend is for the build-out. So we're less than 10%, not where I'd like to be. I'd like to be a little lower than that, but that's where we are today. So I just want to give that update. We are still working through on quantities with the contractor, as well as punch list items that'll be starting up here as weather permits. Any questions?
So, that 290 difference, do you think that, I guess based on your memo, you think that's high?
I think that'll be pretty close to where it ends up. Because the grading number, there's the landscaping, which, I mean, you look at it, there it's 18,000 versus 9,000. Although there's a large discrepancy on the quantity, it's just not that expensive an item. Same would go for erosion control. We're significantly higher on that, but even if we bring that down, it's just not that expensive of an item overall. The real number that jumped out as far as moving the needle dollars and cents wise is the grading. And that's where we've got, I think we're going to end up pretty close to the number that we're at right now. He's at 353, we're at 306. We've paid 325, which is reflected in this number here. So, and the 290 difference, we knew that was going to be 155, so it's not.
Because of the extra work?
Correct. We presented this when we went to the extra. The 155 is what we expected, so we're at 290. So we are significantly higher than that. However, it's not 290 flat out.
Do we have any questions for Tim? Thanks, Tim.
Good, thank you.
All right, discussion, consideration of Wisconsin statutes and requirements for creating police and fire commissions, as well as prior studies reports regarding feasibility for a joint police department with the town of East Troy. This started with a discussion between Eileen and I, conversations about population growth, numbers that the state has for requirements. I think that one of the numbers we talked about at one point, this isn't with any factual information, was 10,000 with combined municipalities that the state would require us to form a commission of some sort for our emergency services. And then Eileen started looking into it a little further, and there was another number that came up of 5,500 for our police department to form a district of some sort. And that's why this is being brought in front of us. Just the idea of talking about these are potential needs or requirements by the state because of our population growth and because of things happening within our community. Talk about it and maybe get in front of it before the state comes in and tells us what we have to do. And then in that whole process, we've shared a lot of information about a study that was done, a number of studies, and some information from our prior chief, memo identifying what the benefits of having combined police forces are. Kind of an odd timing with it, but it just happened to coincide with the fact that their chief is actually leaving. So it's just a part of what happened, and it's a good time to probably have these conversations. I know that there was some discussion at a town board level, and I don't know that they're necessarily going to go forward, but they have their large meeting tomorrow, Tuesday night, to really put this on the table for all of their citizens to actually discuss. But that information and that aspect of it, it's amazing and a little alarming to me that it was put off, and by way of suggestion on some pretty good information, that it would have been a financially responsible thing for us to do to combine the forces, and it was also a coverage idea. The fact that our two municipalities would have better services by combining the two services into one police force. But I know there are some upfront costs, and that wouldn't be captured necessarily in year one, but it all makes a lot of sense, and it all is pretty clear when you put all the numbers together that it's financially and from a safety aspect responsible of us to start having discussions like this.
I just look at the success that we've had with the Fire and Emergency Services District, and we've been doing that for decades. We're creating the Tri-Troy Library. We're leveraging a lot of those. I mean, I know the town of Troy is not officially part of the Emergency Services District, but they contract with them for rescue services. So it seems to make sense to me. I know one of their topics for the agenda tomorrow with the town is the construction, I think, of a new garage. You know, we've talked about the need for a new firehouse, garage bay. At some point, we need to talk about for DPW as well. Like, there just seems to be a good time. I really hate for everybody to build a bunch of buildings and then say, oh, we should merge, and now we have two buildings for everything that we don't need.
There was talk some time ago about merging departments, like everybody knows. The main holdback in that was the retirement funds. That was one reason why the town and the village couldn't get together, because it was like a positive and a negative. Things wouldn't work out as far as the retirement funds and what was being paid in. Remember that? And
I think you're talking, there was that one study I read. It was the first one from 1990 or the 2000 maybe, where at that time the town of East Troy was not part of WRS, but they are now, so that's not really an issue.
okay. That's why it didn't work back then, is because they couldn't get over that one speed bump of how to work that out.
The other thing that I've heard a lot about is that if there was combined services in that manner, that we'd be losing officers, and that's not actually the truth. Maintaining exactly the amount of officers that are on staff, full-time officers, as we do now for the village as well as for the town.
So with the departure of their chief, that leaves them with 4 officers, is that right?
Yeah, they'll be down to 4 because they have one opening now for a police officer, and then, yeah, when he leaves April 30th, yeah, they'll be down to 4.
So they have 4, but they're budgeted for 5, or I guess.
Well, counting the chief, 6.
And then maybe put our friends from the county on the hot seat, but how much coverage is having to be provided for the town during third shift?
Any shift.
I mean, right.
I mean, what's the overall coverage that we have?
Don't forget, in summer, you got the coverage of the lake patrol.
Yeah. I can't answer what their coverage is, and I'm not going to. I mean, we're fine here in the village, but they haven't been fully staffed since 2018 or beginning of 2019, so.
Are we providing any coverage for them?
No, we do not.
We don't, okay.
So this is just a discussion, and also to think about not just the police departments, but also the emergency services aspect as well. Growth that we're having within the village and the town, the fact that we already have a police district right now, emergency services district, we may be challenged to create some kind of commission at some point. It's not something that's happening now, but in the future, and that's why I wanted to have some discussion about that. You know, how does that look? How do we get in front of this? Is this something that maybe in a period of time we have a committee for this as well, and or some kind of direction to staff to try and investigate further on this, to see what our needs are and what the state will require us to do at what level, at what time. We know what kind of growth we have coming up with the Torontomy Apartments and a couple of different projects happening within the village, which will increase our population substantially, and we're going to get close. Talk about it.
I would like to clarify in my memo, I believed that it was based on the census number, and Attorney Geary did get back to me today, and he clarified that is correct. So technically, if we're not a joint department, we're 5,500, but we reach that before the next census, we do not have to do anything until 2030. It's based on the census number. So, in the interim, we get Department of Administration population estimates, and according to the state statute, we do not have to base it off of that. But if there were a joint police department, that number requirement for population 5,000 then rather than 5,500.
Are there other joint police with villages and towns in the state?
There's been a couple that have happened. I'd have to look back at them. Then there's also been a couple that have been explored and they didn't happen. But I think, if you don't explore it and just let the opportunity go by, you might be missing out on something. There might be savings for the taxpayers in both communities. It's going to help with scheduling, and I think your coverage will be that much better. Like those reports said, your response time will probably be better. And just working together so much as we do now, I don't see why it isn't something you wouldn't explore. I don't understand why there's people that are so against it. But I think it's, in my point of view, it's something that should be looked into, both communities. I mean, if you find out when you start to start to go through the process, you find out, well, no, it's going to cost us more money or it's just not going to work, then, you can always pull out and say it's just not going to work. But to just say right off the bat, I'm not interested, I don't think you're doing your due diligence and look. That's my opinion. Nobody else's, but.
And maybe the timing is right now. Cordy and John, we were all set on the consolidation. There's a lot of other issues that came up, and the timing wasn't right. But now the timing might be right to go back and explore it better.
Right, and, I heard somebody say, well, there's just too many. To put the puzzle together would be too hard and you wouldn't be able to do it. Well, every puzzle that I've ever had as a kid growing up until now, I've been able to put it together. So it can be done. And if it's a benefit to both communities, I don't see why you wouldn't try.
Yeah, I think we should look at it. I don't, we need to know the pros and cons or a project. I don't know how we start that process, but
I think it's something that maybe for our next tri-board meetings, we all talk about this together. Have this discussion, have some of this material in front of us ahead of time, in front of everybody. Have that discussion amongst the three boards. Because at that point, maybe that Troy Fire Department may want to be part of the East Troy Fire Department, and or just a larger service for the entire community. And all of this just sounds like a really great idea. Everything seems to be lining up as far as the memos and studies that have been done in the past to identify it as being a benefit to our citizens. That's what we're here for. We're here to try and make the best decisions we can as elected officials for the people that we represent. So if this is a good decision, if it's a good choice for them, and we can afford to do the study to figure that out, then we should do it. All right, we'll put forward something for a next, meeting with the three boards, to have this as a discussion item. We'll provide all of the information in that meeting that we've had with this, presentation here as far as discussion items. All right, moving on to reports, 2022 first quarter police department report. Any questions?
When do you think we could maybe get another copy of the, code enforcement status, especially on items that are not, like, that had outstanding for a long time? Is it in there? Did I miss it?
Yeah,
It's in
she's
there.
got stuff in there.
I'm sorry. Didn't scroll far enough, I see.
Yeah, it's in there.
My apologies.
Yeah. She got it in there. Just wanted to point out, usually I only include a couple pages of the stats or whatever, but, I included UCR numbers from the government in this one. They sent us an email, I think it was at the end of February or something, with our, 2021 Group A crime counts based on incident and arrest and, your Group B arrests. So I included those, and then there's also a comparison from 2020 to 2021 based on the offense comparison. So I just included that in this first quarter, just so you have an idea. The only reason why we only have 2020 and 2021 is because we did not start reporting the new NIBRs until halfway through 2019 when we went to Pro Phoenix. So we don't have those numbers for 2019. So as the years go on, you can kind of see the 4-year outlook on that.
Any other questions for the chief?
What's the biggest concern that you have, or what's the biggest?
In looking at the numbers, I'm not really concerned about too much. Obviously, the vandalism number, I think, jumped out. That's just mostly the reason why that jumped out is it's not, you don't clear those unless somebody comes forward and, so graffiti that we get at the parks that gets reported to us, unless somebody comes forward, there's nothing. And I think we had, if you look at it, we had maybe, I'm just going to use an example, like 15 times it was reported. And we only cleared one of them. To me, I wish we could clear more. But I think that's the biggest thing that I see. For that, I think everything's okay.
Meth, drugs?
I think we're average for our size of our community. Okay.
Burns, since we got more events this summer, you haven't had those in a while?
No. I think we're ready. I think it'll be nice to have more stuff going on.
Other questions? Moving on to library board minutes from 3:15. Questions for Mary?
Amy settling in?
Yes. Very well.
How about Park and Rec board minutes, from 3:14? Emergency services minutes from 3:08. Anything for Joe?
Yes, I was gonna ask Joe.
Joe, you don't have to leave yet.
He runs out the door. As he ran out the door, if Joe could give us a kind of a brief update on the ladder truck.
So the ladder truck is back in service. We were able to complete the repairs on it that were needed, and it passed its 5-year inspection. But with that being said, we were also told by this inspection company it will not make it to its next 5-year mark. We already kind of knew that based off the years that this has been in service and just by NFPA standards, where we should have been replacing this at and where we're at now. So also update you that my 30-year budget plan is almost completed. I'm just tightening up some numbers along the way there. So hopefully within the next month here, I'll be able to present that to you as well, moving forward.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to Planning Commission. Does somebody have a question for 40? All right, how about a verbal update on the handicap parking signage on the square? Jason?
So I just wanted to give you guys a quick update on that. At the last meeting, a resident brought, in citizen participation, a concern about some handicap signs on the square. Just wanted to let you know we're moving forward with that. There's 5 stalls on the square, and we're doing it through the contract, so the contractor is, providing, the signs and installing the signposts in the concrete. They'll be cored in, we'll select the positioning of them. And so that'll be happening in the next few weeks. Signs have been ordered, so it's moving along. We've also, I should say, Doug has assessed all other village parking lots and facilities to make sure everything is signed properly. So we're looking into that and we're moving that forward. Just wanted to let you guys know.
So Jason, are those signs then going to be removable to ease in snow removal?
No,
Darn.
it's either permanent or they're not there. So we'll work around it. We'll make it work. I will just add, we looked into some options, and I don't think that there was anything that wasn't going to be a constant maintenance headache. So the permanent sign is probably the best solution at this point.
I'll make a motion to adjourn into closed session pursuant to Wisconsin Statute 1985 1E. What is that? After that.
Oh.
Yeah, I was trying to, when I read that.
€1.
1E, for the purpose of conducting other specified public business whenever competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session and letter of intent, development agreement, and offers to purchase TID 4. And 1985 1C, to confer with legal counsel for governmental body who is rendering oral or written advice concerning strategy to be adopted by the body with respect to litigation in which it is likely to become involved, the dam impoundment area. Roll call, please.
President Seer?
Yes.
Trustee Alexander?
Yes.
Trustee Nugent? Yes. Trustee Johnson?
Yes.
Trustee Renucci?
Yes.
Trustee Smalley? And Trustee